Most dishes are just recipes, but this is a core memory in a bowl. If you're Vietnamese, you already know. If you're not, say hello to your new favorite comfort food. This is Thịt Kho Tàu. Salty, sweet, and tastes exactly like home.
Every family has their own version, but let me show you mine. Simple enough to make on a weekday, but comforting enough to taste like mom's cooking. So the first thing we're gonna do is prepare our pork. And today I'm using two different cuts of pork. I'm using pork belly and pork shoulder. Traditionally, this dish is made with pork belly, but for my family, we find that it can get really rich. So we do like to combine it with something that's a little bit leaner, like pork shoulder. I wouldn't go any leaner than that, like a tenderloin or something, because you still do need a little bit of fat to help bring the richness of the dish out. So here's the pork belly. This is sold in a lot of different ways, but I find that in the Western stores, they don't leave the skin on. And I do think that the skin adds a little bit of texture to the dish, and that's traditionally how it's cooked. So if you don't mind eating the skin, you can find something like this at the Asian grocery store. So something that you do have to be aware of when you buy it with the skin on is that sometimes it's not cleaned well. So the skin can sometimes have like little bits of debris and hair on it. My piece today is not too bad, but sometimes you do have to use a knife and just gently scrape it to clean off some of that hair. Sounds kind of gross, but it'll be worth it. If your pork belly comes in a huge chunk like this, the first thing you're gonna wanna do is cut it into strips. And then from there, we're gonna cube it. And I'm aiming for cubes about 2 inches wide, just like this. And the reason why we want to leave it a little bit bigger is because this is going to be braising for a long time. And so we want it to be able to keep its shape and not fall apart. Okay, so that was my pork belly. I'm going to do the same to my pork shoulder. So there we have it. Everything's all cut. And what I'm going to do now is parboil it so we can clean it a little bit, so there's less skimming we're going to have to do later on. So to a pot of cold water, I'm just going to add some ginger slices and a tiny little bit of salt just to help us clean the pork and to ensure that we get rid of that porky smell. Then we can begin to add in all the pieces of pork. So while we wait for the pork to come to a boil, let's prepare our eggs. Today I'm using 2 different types of eggs. Back in Vietnam, they typically make this with duck eggs, but today I'm using some chicken eggs and a little bit of quail eggs as well. I'm starting to see some Western stores start to carry quail eggs. I've seen them fresh at Costco, but if you can't access fresh quail eggs, you can also use canned quail eggs that are sold like this. We're gonna have to hard boil these eggs before putting it into our braise. But recently I learned a hack that's really helped me get an even clean peel on the hard boiled eggs. So what you do is you take a metal spoon and you kind of tap it lightly on this end until you hear this. But when you hear it, you'll know and you'll feel it too. Here, let me demonstrate. Hear that? That's 1, 2. Awesome. Doing that actually breaks up the membrane that holds the egg together. And when that membrane is broken, it's gonna be much easier for you to peel the eggs later on. I wonder if we can do it to the quail eggs too. It works for quail eggs too, guys. I learned that on social media, so that was time well spent scrolling. So to a pot of cold water, adding just a splash of vinegar, because the vinegar is also gonna help us peel the eggs more easily. Water, I'm gonna add our eggs and bring it to a boil. I'm hard boiling these, so I'll be cooking this for around 7-8 minutes. So things are starting to bubble up and foam up. So what you're gonna wanna do is bring everything over to the sink, dump it all out, and rinse the pieces of pork in cold water. So the first thing we're gonna add is, of course, our fish sauce, chicken bouillon, a little bit of salt, and a little bit of sugar. I'm also gonna add a little squeeze of lemon or lime juice because this is going to help the fat stay clear. Don't worry, it's not gonna make things sour. Okay, so let's set that aside for about an hour, just so the flavors can kind of lock in, and we'll begin cooking right after that. So the first thing we have to do is make our caramel sauce. I'm using a braiser here. You're gonna wanna use something that's very heavy so that it conducts heat evenly. So turn your stove on to medium-low heat. You don't want too high of a heat for this because when you're making caramel sauce, there's a very thin line between perfect and burnt. So to the cold pot or pan, add in your granulated sugar and also add just a splash of water. I'm using a white braiser here, so it's gonna be very easy for me to see the color change. But if you're using something dark, I think you're gonna have to keep a closer eye on it just to ensure that you get the right color. Don't go anywhere. So many times I've walked away because I'm thinking that this is a slow process, and I come back and it's like scorching and all ruined, and I've had to do it several times over again. So just stand here and be patient. So it's starting to change color now. You're gonna wanna watch it very carefully, but take a look here. You can see that the edges are forming like this golden brown color. See these big bubbles that are forming? That's when you know that it's close to being done. So this color is what we're looking for. And once you've reached this desired color, pour in a little bit of oil just to help loosen it up, okay? So that's how you make caramel sauce, which is gonna be the foundation of how we braise the pork. So turn the heat back on and we're gonna put the pork in. So just make sure that you coat all the pieces in the caramel sauce, right? We're gonna simmer this in some coconut water. So I'm putting enough just to submerge all the pieces of meat.
When your braise starts to come to a light boil, you're going to want to skim out any impurities that you spot. This is a dish that's often served at Lunar New Year and at gatherings, so presentation is important. I'm using whole garlic cloves and shallots instead of mincing them. This allows the aromatics to infuse the broth with deep flavor while keeping the liquid perfectly clear and debris-free. Partially cover the pot to allow steam to escape, because a rapid boil is going to emulsify the fats and impurities, which is going to make your broth murky and cloudy.
This is one of those Vietnamese dishes that just screams nostalgia. When I went away to university about 6 hours away and I was homesick, this was all I thought about. Ask any young Vietnamese adults who've recently moved out on their own what they miss most about mom's cooking. This is one of those dishes that instantly comes to mind. This dish is called Thịt Kho Tàu in Vietnamese. And there's 3 different interpretations of why we call it this. The first interpretation of this is that the dish derived from Chinese people, because in the 17th and 18th century in southern Vietnam, there's a huge influx of Chinese immigrants because a lot of people were fleeing China due to dynastic and political changes. When I was growing up, I just thought Tàu meant Chinese. I thought it was a direct translation that meant a Chinese person. But when I went back to Vietnam and I was addressing a Chinese person as a người Tàu, it was met with a lot of disdain because it's actually a derogatory term for Chinese people. Người Tàu means boat people. It's pointing to the fact that a lot of these people came in by boat. So if you're still addressing Chinese people as người Tàu, I think a much more polite way is to say người Hoa. The second interpretation is that this huge big pot of braised meat is such a heavy and comforting meal that a lot of sailors and people who worked at sea brought this huge pot with them. It's a dish that could be eaten at sea on the ship.
Wow.
Thịt Kho Tàu. Which makes sense because in the southern regions of Vietnam, fishing and aquaculture was a big part of the economy. The third interpretation, which I just learned of recently, is that Tàu is actually a southern regional word that means salty sweet. And it's actually used to describe what happens when fresh water meets ocean water, like at the mouth of a river. And that's such a beautiful and accurate way to describe the taste of this dish. Not too sweet, not too salty, just right. Some families just call it Thịt Kho Trứng. But I'm curious, if you grew up with this dish, what did your family call it? Let me know in the comments.
After about an hour, I'm going to be removing the whole shallots and garlic before adding in our eggs. You want to add the eggs in when the meat is around 75% of the desired tenderness. For me, this is often around the 60 to 75 minute mark. Some people say, why don't we just throw in the eggs at the beginning? And the answer is because overcooking the eggs will toughen the egg whites, turning them rubbery rather than tender. Oh my goodness, this smell brings me back to my childhood. Thịt kho on the stove, fresh white rice finishing cooking. There's simply nothing better. I'm home.
So after a few hours, we're finally done. This dish does take some time, but it's well worth it. Look at this beautiful color that we have on the braise. The outside of the egg's taken on a really nice color. That's when you know it's perfect. And because this is such a decadent and rich dish, I'm serving this with a side dish of dưa ya, which is like a pickled side dish, similar to the pickled carrots and daikon that you guys are accustomed to. But this one also has bean sprouts, garlic chives, and a little bit of red pepper. Let's give it a try. That pairs so beautifully with the white rice. And this sauce is to die for too. This sauce alone is enough, guys. I don't even need the meat. Well, there you have it. This is one of the most comforting dishes in Vietnamese cuisine. Give it a try.